Caitlin Clark's appearance on a Chinese-language podcast turned into something far bigger than a casual chat. Within minutes of airing, clips went viral. Thanks to her openness about the pressures of fame, her challenges on the court, and most notably, her plans to bring her message overseas. Her honesty about defensive battles and her desire to connect with fans in China gave the conversation an emotional weight that fans hadn't seen before. But it was her acknowledgement of being a role model for boys, not just girls, that struck a cultural nerve. This wasn't about breaking records. It was about breaking assumptions. The interview's impact goes beyond fan reactions. It signals a real-time shift in how we define sports leadership. Clark is showing that influence isn't confined to the scoreboard. It's about how athletes use their platform to challenge conventions, expand reach, and lead with authenticity.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Her decision to lean into international media, speak directly to new audiences, and highlight gender role evolution isn't accidental. It's strategic. And it's pushing women's basketball toward a more dynamic, more global, and more inclusive future. Caitlin Clark has been in plenty of interviews lately, but this one caught everyone off guard. A Chinese-language podcast, a casual setup, no ESPN-style lighting or courtside chaos. Just a conversation that pulled the curtain back on her mindset, and more importantly, her plans. For anyone paying attention, it wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. Calm, confident, clear. She talked about more than basketball. She talked about influence, global reach, and yes, an upcoming trip to China. Not a vacation, not a media tour in disguise. A strategic move, a deliberate step into international waters. Clark isn't just scoring threes anymore. She's playing chess. Made it clear she knows what she represents. She didn't stumble into global popularity by accident. She acknowledged that her style and energy have captured attention far beyond the court and far beyond the U.S. She mentioned how young girls in China are now watching her highlights, mimicking her shots, and dreaming bigger because of her presence. Then came the twist. She pointed out that it's not just girls. Young boys are also listing her as their sports hero. That's a cultural shift, a flip of the script. Boys growing up seeing a woman as the top athlete to watch and emulate. No disclaimers, no comparisons, just Clark front and center. Throughout the interview, she stayed grounded. She spoke about the pressures of her rising profile, but never acted like it was a burden. When the host asked about comparisons to Steph Curry, she didn't dodge it. She embraced it, even while acknowledging the weight it carries. Not just because of the basketball, but because of what it means for the WNBA. Clark's brand is built on visibility. She's not just clocking in minutes for the Indiana Fever. She's reshaping the narrative around what women's sports can be. The media moments, the podcast appearances, the fan interactions, they're all part of something larger. A campaign to redefine what it means to be a superstar in women's basketball. Still, it's not all easy. The interview took a more serious tone when Clark opened up about the mental toll. She didn't give a dramatic monologue, but there was a pause, a moment where it felt real. She mentioned how the pressure isn't just game-related. It's about living up to expectations, on the court, online, in conversations happening in languages she doesn't even speak. And she knows not everyone supports her moves. The idea of being a global ambassador while still proving herself as a rookie in the WNBA, that's a balancing act. One wrong step, and the backlash comes fast. But Clark made it clear, she's not slowing down. What stands out most is how she's still producing on the floor. Her game hasn't taken a back seat to the media whirlwind. Teams know what she brings. They've started doubling her, throwing aggressive defenders at her, and trying to push her out of rhythm. She brought up how physical some of these matchups have become, specifically calling out how teams like the Connecticut Sun have tried to contain her. And yet, she's still managing to lead. Her highlight reels are growing by the week. She's pulling up from the logo, setting the tone, and drawing in audiences that wouldn't have watched a WNBA game a year ago. Every game she plays feels like a national event. Even the Fever jersey has taken on a new life. Clark mentioned during the podcast how surreal it is to see kids wearing her number in different countries. She talked about fan mail coming from Europe and Asia, and how surreal it is to think her name is recognizable in places she's never been. That Fever jersey? It's turning into a symbol, not just of her, but of the new era she's helping build. It's not just gear, it's identity. And for many young fans, it's the first time they've worn a jersey with a woman's name on the back. That matters. It's visibility in its rawest form. Of course, with fame comes friction. Clark didn't pretend the games have been easy. She described how teams are getting increasingly aggressive. Physical defense, targeted contact, not dirty necessarily, but deliberate. They want to disrupt her flow. And in a league where respect is still being negotiated in real time, every hit becomes a conversation. There's a larger point underneath it. Clark acknowledged that part of being a trailblazer means drawing resistance. Some teams see her as a threat to their identity. Some players resent the attention. But instead of pushing back, Clark takes the hits and moves forward. His tone shifted when she reflected on what her influence could mean long-term. This isn't just about playing in front of packed arenas or signing autographs until her wrist aches. It's about creating something that lasts after the hype fades. She spoke openly about the responsibility she feels, not because anyone forced it on her, but because she understands how rare this platform is. During the podcast, she mentioned being intentional with her moves, whether it's signing with brands, showing up at media events, or engaging with international fans. She's doing it with a blueprint in mind. The WNBA doesn't have many athletes with the power to shift global perception, and Clark seems to know she might be one of the first to do it at this level. When the host asked her about her trip to China, Clark didn't play coy. She confirmed it's happening, and soon. No vague, maybe, or we'll see. This trip is already in motion. While she didn't lay out the full itinerary, the implication was clear. This is a basketball and business trip. She hinted at youth camps, brand meetings, and other outreach efforts that go beyond just smiling for a few photos. She described how excited she was to meet fans there face-to-face. But she also made it clear this is part of a larger plan. It's about building bridges, extending the reach of women's basketball, and showing leagues around the world that American players can command attention on an international stage. Back home, Clark's influence is just as visible. The style of play is changing. You can see it in high school gyms and college rec centers, kids launching deep threes, mimicking her release, doing the little shoulder shrug after a clutch shot. Coaches are adapting their systems. Players are trying to keep up. And yet, for all her highlights, Clark knows there's always someone trying to dim the spotlight. Every time she scores 30, there's a critic waiting to say it was against weak defense. Every time she struggles, someone's ready to say she's overrated. She's not new to it, but the volume is louder now. The stakes are higher. And still, she keeps showing up. One of the podcast's more telling moments came when Clark talked about seeing her own jersey in the crowd. Not just in Indiana, but in places she's never set foot. She recalled seeing a clip from a game watch party in Beijing where someone held up a Fever jersey like it was a national flag. That's when you realize this isn't normal. This isn't typical rookie attention. Clark's name is crossing borders in ways women's basketball has rarely seen. Her jersey sales are topping charts. She's turning arenas into destinations, and teams are reshuffling their marketing just to keep up. The conversation also drifted toward legacy. Clark didn't call herself a pioneer, but the host pushed the point. Is she aware that what she's doing now could open the door for dozens of others? Her answer was brief but telling. I hope so. She's not chasing titles for herself alone. She's trying to leave the sport better than she found it. She talked about players who came before her, names that didn't get the attention or the money or the media love, players who walked so she could sprint. Her hope is that whoever comes after her gets to fly. And if a trip to China helps make that happen, she's on board. Clark didn't shy away from talking about the physicality she's been facing. She detailed how defenders are studying her moves now. There's tape on everything she does. She'll pull up and already see a double team collapsing before she even sets her feet. The league is adapting to her fast. But what's harder than defending her shot is defending her momentum. Clark isn't just a threat on the scoreboard. She's a cultural force. And some teams, knowingly or not, try to test that. The hard fouls, the trash talk, the off-ball bumps. It's not just gameplay, it's message sending. Clark acknowledged it, but didn't flinch. That's the game, she said. Of course, it gets lonely. Not in the dramatic, tearful way people expect, but in the quiet moments between games and flights and interviews. Clark admitted that sometimes it's overwhelming. The pressure to be on all the time, to perform, to inspire, to smile for every selfie. She gets that it comes with the territory, but that doesn't make it easy. There was a moment of vulnerability when she mentioned how often she thinks about staying grounded, about not letting the brand consume the person. She has support, sure, but the responsibility of leading a movement is heavy. She didn't complain. She just told the truth. Clark returned to a theme she clearly feels strongly about, changing the way the world views women's basketball. She didn't present it like a grand mission statement. It was just the reality she's living in. Her presence on this Chinese podcast wasn't just symbolic. It was a tactical step toward making women's hoops a global conversation. She talked about her awareness of what happens when women athletes step into new markets. How people who've never followed the WNBA before are suddenly tuned in. She acknowledged that she's not the first to try it, but she might be arriving at the moment when the world is finally ready to listen. She also discussed the ripple effect she's seeing from her games. It's not just fans showing up, it's players. At every arena she travels to, there are girls in the front rows watching her every move. Not just because she's famous, but because she plays a style that looks fun and fearless. And that's contagious. She mentioned seeing an uptick in young guards pulling off her signature moves at camps, scrimmages, even warm-ups before WNBA games. Her game is replicable in the best way. It looks like something you can try, even if you're not 6'5". And that's how you build generational impact. But when you change the game, people start to guard you differently. Clark detailed how the league is starting to use brute force to slow her down. She made a passing reference to the infamous Connecticut Sun matchup where the physicality went viral. Not because it was dirty, but because it exposed a reality. She's being defended like a franchise player, and that's exactly what she is. Clark talked about learning to anticipate the hit, how the fouls come earlier now, how teams try to trap her emotionally as much as physically, and how, even when she stays composed, the scrutiny around her reactions is 10 times higher. That microscope, it never turns off. There was a key quote buried in the interview that felt like a thesis statement. It's not just about me anymore. That sentence came after a long answer about leadership, visibility, and the WNBA's growth. Clark isn't just riding a wave, she's driving it. She compared it to the Curry effect in the NBA. When Steph made the three-pointer the center of modern basketball, it changed everything: training, recruiting, even shoe design. Clark doesn't say she's doing the same, but she points out the signs. More kids are practicing logo shots. More parents are investing in girls' basketball. More brands are paying attention. She expanded on that by highlighting how the growth isn't limited to just the U.S. The numbers don't lie. Chinese fans are tuning in. European sponsors are asking questions. And international leagues are seeing a boost in visibility just from Clark's name appearing in overseas headlines. And that's why this upcoming China trip matters. It's not just a business trip, it's a proof point. Clark said she hopes it sets a precedent, one where top WNBA talent can cultivate global reach without needing to wait for someone else's permission. Because right now, she's doing it her way. But even with the impact, there's isolation. Clark touched on what it feels like to live in this kind of spotlight. She said she tries to remind herself of the why behind it all. The visibility, the cultural shift, the pride she feels knowing young girls believe in themselves more because of her. But she admitted that it's easy to get tired. She shared that there are days when she'd rather skip the media obligations and just play ball. But she doesn't. Not because she loves the attention, but because she understands that disappearing from the conversation isn't an option right now. Every time she shows up, it strengthens the foundation. Toward the end of the interview, Clark revisited the moment she first saw someone wearing her Fever jersey overseas. It was a grainy photo sent to her team, nothing fancy, but stopped her cold. She said it hit her that she's now part of someone's story in another country. And that changes the stakes. She knows kids will wear that jersey and feel a sense of power. That it means something beyond just fandom. It means belonging, representation, aspiration. Clark didn't say all that out loud, but it didn't need to be spelled out. The message was clear. Clark didn't sound overwhelmed when she talked about her influence. She sounded focused. She spoke about the significance of being someone who represents more than just skill, someone whose presence can alter how women's basketball is perceived around the world. Her words weren't boastful. They were factual. She knows what she's doing and who it's affecting. She talked about how surreal it feels when fans from different parts of the world DM her, thanking her for being visible, for being loud, for being herself. And she said that's what keeps her grounded. The individual stories. The little reminders that this movement is personal for a lot of people, even though she'll never meet. When asked directly about her plans beyond China, she gave a diplomatic but telling response. She said she's staying flexible, but is exploring partnerships that will help grow the game internationally. That might mean more camps, more brand deals, more collaborations with international athletes. The message was clear. She's not just dipping her toe into the global space. She's ready to swim. And her choice of a Chinese platform to share this wasn't random. It's one of the fastest-growing basketball markets in the world. Clark seems to understand that if the WNBA wants to expand its reach, it needs someone who can break through those cultural and language barriers. And right now, she's the closest thing they've got. There was also a telling moment when Clark was asked how the WNBA is handling this growth. She paused for a second, just long enough to suggest the answer wasn't simple. Then she said, "We're learning as we go." She mentioned that the league is adapting, but she made it clear the pace of change hasn't always matched the level of interest. Media demand is up. Ticket sales are rising. New fans are pouring in, but infrastructure still catching up. She wasn't criticizing, she was observing, and she knows she's part of the reason things are speeding up. Not surprisingly, that kind of acceleration has its downsides. Clark admitted there are times when she feels disconnected, like the world is spinning faster than she can process it. She talked about missing time with family, missing the ability to just be anonymous, to walk into a coffee shop without someone pointing or pulling out a phone. She's not complaining about fame. She understands it's part of the deal. But she wanted people to understand that being everywhere all the time has a cost. She even mentioned being cautious about burnout, because no matter how driven she is, she's still the whirlwind. Her focus on the court hasn't wavered. In fact, she said the intensity of the games helps her reset. Basketball is still the place where everything makes sense. It's where she can be sharp, physical, relentless, without having to explain herself. She described how different players approach guarding her now. The physicality is expected, but it's the strategy that's shifted. She said she can feel when a team has spent hours watching film, dissecting her every move, planning to shut her down. And that, to her, is a compliment. She also brought up the rise in merch sales, not as a flex, but as a signal. Her jersey is selling internationally. That's not just a measure of popularity. It's a sign that fans see her as more than a regional star. That kind of visibility has ripple effects. She said that when people buy her jersey, they're buying into a version of the sport that includes them. It's no longer just about watching the game. It's about belonging to the culture. And Clark understands that her job now includes making sure that culture grows, even in places where WNBA coverage is still new. Back to the court, Clark addressed the elephant in the room. The fouls, the targeting, the constant physical pressure from opponents who want to rattle her. She acknowledged it's real, and it's personal. She said it's part of the adjustment every top player faces, but she also knows her visibility makes her a different kind of target. She recalled moments in games where the contact was clearly more than just defensive hustle. And while she never named names, her point was obvious. Being at the top means everyone wants to test you. Not just your skill, but your composure. Out the interview with a tone that felt both ambitious and honest. She said her goal isn't just to win games, It's to elevate everything around her. The league, the culture, the fan experience. She wants to help build a WNBA that reaches more people, pulls in bigger crowds, and gives young players something to aspire to that actually feels within reach. She didn't sugarcoat the work it takes. She acknowledged that she's constantly balancing her role as a player with the off-court weight of being a symbol. But she also said that if she's in this position, she's going to use it. And that includes stepping into international markets, showing up where people don't expect her, and making the game global in ways that haven't been done before. When she talked about being defended, she gave a little smirk that said it all. She knows teams are throwing bodies at her, not just to slow her down, but to send a message. You're not untouchable. But every hit, every hard screen, every shove under the basket, it's proof she matters. That her presence changes the game. She doesn't shy away from it. She uses it. Clark said that the tougher the defense, the more focused she becomes. And the more they try to shake her, the more they show their hand. Because if you're game planning around one player night after night, she's clearly doing something right. Clark wrapped the interview with one of the most grounded answers of the whole conversation. She was asked what she hopes people remember about her 10 years from now. Her answer? That I made it easier for the next one. She didn't say she wanted to be remembered as the best scorer, or the most famous, or even the richest. Just that she opened a door. That's the part that sticks. Through the media tours, the podcast appearances, the packed arenas, and yes, the occasional bruises from overly aggressive defense. Caitlin Clark is building something. Not just a career, a blueprint. She's making it possible for a girl halfway across the world to dream of playing at the highest level and actually believe it could happen. She's changing who gets to be a hero in sports. And she's doing it all while still learning, still growing, still getting better. If you're following this journey, you're watching something rare. Something that might reshape how we talk about women's sports for years to come. So if you're here for that, don't just scroll past. Like, share it, drop your thoughts in the comments, and hit subscribe. Because Caitlin Clark's story is only getting bigger, and you don't want to miss what's next.